Testing, testing. 3, 2, 1, and we are on. Hey, what is going on, Los Angeles? It's J. T. And today is Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. And on this day in Los Angeles, we actually got some major breaking news about none other than the Pacific Palisades fire and allegations, official charges against Jonathan Rinderknecht. So let's go ahead and play the clip and then discuss it a little bit, because what a moment it is for us out here on the West Coast and the rest of you all watching with us.
Did this Uber driver start one of the most devastating fires in LA history, the Palisades fire? 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht was taken into custody and is charged with setting a small fire on New Year's Day that burned underground, eventually erupting a week later into the Palisades fire that devastated the wealthy neighborhood.
He dropped someone off. He was in this neighborhood, and he went up to this hilltop around 12:12 a.m. He ignited a fire.
During the investigation, two of his passengers described his mood the night the fire was ignited.
He appeared agitated and angry that night.
The arrest comes after a 9-month investigation.
He was the only person in this location at the time this fire ignited. We have no other indication that any other person was there. There were no fireworks at the time.
As evidence, authorities cited these images he generated of a burning city via AI. They also say in the weeks leading up to the fire, Rinderknecht watched a music video that shows a French rapper starting small fires. I'm in the heart of the Pacific Palisades.
Okay, so just to be sure, to be clear about the facts on the ground, Jonathan Rinderknecht is 29 years old. He's also not a native Californian, certainly not native to LA, but he's from Florida, as far as I understand it, and may have some family in France just as well, but not too much is known about that just yet. I also saw via the LA Times that his parents were missionaries or are missionaries. And so it is kind of, I mean, obviously a tragic irony that their son would allegedly do such a thing. Now, these allegations, until proven true, have to be treated as allegations, but we can still make some notes about what we know so far, according to Bill Asaley of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the state of California. The attorney at some point mentions that Jonathan Rinderknecht not only started the fire, but also in the days leading up to it. Rinderknecht went to ChatGPT at some point and had ChatGPT generate this image of a burning city and people obviously in panic with vehicles sort of running through them in total mayhem. And so this is not easy news to process, most of all for those victimized by these fires, because it's still going to take some time to know more about Rinderknecht's intent, about whether he knew what he was doing, and about how this basically mingles with, or one should say conflagrates with, the rest of the logistical situation on the ground at that time. The anchorman does state that the fire was set underground, as well as that firefighters went out and thought they had contained the fire, only to find 6 days later that this was not the case. But at that time, or by then, the gusts were a whole different ballgame than on the very night of January 1st. They were in the 70s or 80s, if not more so, and it was very dangerous. Certainly for a helicopter, it was unthinkable for a helicopter to get over there, and it was just as difficult, if not more so, I imagine, to get crews out to the center of the blaze without placing their lives in absolute harm's way. I mean, there's a lot that's involved with fighting fires, right? If anyone and everyone could do it, anyone and everyone would, but you have to have special qualifications and then a team that is accurately assessing the situation on the ground. And lo and behold, what's also true as well is that even in 2025, for all of ChatGPT's noise and all the Google mapping that has taken place out there, we are still just dots, granular dots on the face of the earth who can be done away with in a moment's time, in just an instant. And that's exactly what happened in the Pacific Palisades, as well as in Altadena this past January. And so after 9 months, at least for the former, I do think this is the beginning towards some sort of closure. But let me not be remiss either to note that we have more facts on the ground, not featured in this story, but featured via another article that actually got out just a few days ago, maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And maybe these folks at the LA Times knew that this news was about to break, so they kind of decided to get ahead of it. If so, kudos, props to them for sure, because it was, yeah, this story from a little over a week ago, actually, that notes that in the last 8 years, California has lost more homes due to wildfires than ever before in the state's history. And that from 2017 through today, just 38% of the homes lost from 2017 through 2020 have actually been rebuilt. Moreover, the homes that have been rebuilt in wealthier suburban areas, whereas more rural and more working class areas have not seen the same. We're talking about a difference of nearly 80% in wine country versus 5% in the more rural Butte County, just to name one example, right? And so when it comes to the Pacific Palisades and Altadena, one is definitely historically more working class than the other. That is certainly Altadena. And so if the facts on the ground at this point have anything to say about it, it's that the Pacific Palisades will likely definitely be seeing a rebuilding faster than the city of Altadena. What is also true, though, is that Malibu, for example, is just one area on this west side, this historically wealthy west side, that hasn't had much good news with respect to rebuilding over the past 9 months, actually. There was this commissioner or this consultant that Malibu had contracted who actually resigned and who actually called for the mayor to respectfully resign from the rebuilding effort in Malibu just as well, because of such a lack of progress in 9 months, because there are all these permits that have to be signed off on, because there's just too much money involved when it comes to consultation, I suppose, and then some. Red tape, bureaucracy to no end, bureaucracy galore. And so it's tough. It's tough to think about these folks and how they have to start over, because here in Los Angeles, you love the city, you love the region for all it has to offer, and whether it be in a city like Altadena or in a community such as Malibu's, or over on the west side, even in the Pacific Palisades, you can definitely relate to why people choose to live where they do, to one extent or another. Los Angeles and California, Southern California especially, have so much to offer. But for communities in harm's way, which in this specific case happened to be these communities farther north of LA County, if not farther up the mountains, if you will, not really closer to the city centers themselves. There's a huge risk involved, and this is exactly that risk. Mike Davis wrote very well about it in not City of Quartz, which is his magnum opus, but Ecology, Ecology of Fear. And for anyone who has ever heard the name Mike Davis and thought about where to start, because he's such a prolific, versatile, legendary writer, rest in peace. May his soul rest in peace. And as he said, F the bourgeoisie. Even though City of Quartz is kind of that titan and the one most of us tend to go with, I also recommend Ecology of Fear for his analysis on just how much risk has always been involved in building closer to the mountainscape, given all the chaparral, I believe it was referred to in his work, and the fact that we have long periods without rain here in Los Angeles, and then these Santa Ana gusts or winds, as you may or may not know about. And then, given the fact that, hey, building infrastructure and building a county-wide system that is actually effective at engaging with the changing reality on the ground due to climate change, hey, that's not where we're at. We're a long way out from that. We are on the opposite end of where we need to be on that, and this is just one of many indications of it. But yeah, shout out to Mike Davis and Ecology of Fear. I very much recommend it. Now, I also want to note that for events such as this, you're going to have a whole lot of commentary, a whole lot of reacting on the internet. And so you can see, for example, that not long after, you can see here, for example, that not long after the news first broke, you had a ton of people already finding a way to pin this on the Democrats, on the governor and on the mayor of Los Angeles, who maybe should also be arrested along with Rinderknecht, right? But what I want to point out about this is that, hey, like, it's not original thinking, actually. Like, if you turn on, if and when you log on to your Yahoo account, any one of these days, you'll see, without much effort, that the president, who just got ICE agents out to the city of Chicago and the city of Portland, and who's also called for the National Guard or the military to assist ICE in these cities, guess what? He's also called for the arrests of the mayors and the governors, for the democratically elected mayors and governors of these cities for refusing to comply with his so-called attempt at law and order. Law and order, of course, being placed in these bunny ears, because what is law and order to a president who's been convicted of 34 felony counts last time that we checked, and who actually stood to be convicted of more, if not for gaining the presidency at the very last minute somehow, some way? That's, again, just a set of facts to consider out there. But I mention it because rhetoric like that and spewing out the toxicity of an ideology like that, it leads to other people, to the sycophants, to the followers, to the goons, to mimic the same thing, to mimic the same line. And this is how Nazi Germany was won for the Nazis and lost for all the non-Aryans in the 1930s. And this is exactly what we have to fight against becoming in the United States here in the 21st century, right? Nearly 100 years afterwards. So the Monday morning quarterbacking is bound to happen, but it's important to note that this is what's going on, right? I mean, to some extent, there is not always bad faith involved in making criticisms of not just, hey, like the story, but also the context and the various factors at play, including who was in charge at the time and who was supposed to oversee these efforts. Because, hey, should there be some form of acknowledgement of what these elected officials overlooked during this time? Absolutely, there should. That there's nothing wrong with calling for that, right? That's what you elect an official for, anyway, is to show up in more ways than one when it comes to these events which affect the constituency. But it really is also important to note that investigators spend time, in this case, 9 months, finding a way to make an accusation with some standing, right? With quite a bit of standing, certainly with more standing than most people online who get to tweet about it are going to have, generally speaking, right? So, yes, we can react, and yes, we can essentially state how we feel and what our opinion on the matter is. So be it. But I think we also have to bring some levity to just what is going on if we're going to get anywhere. The accusations against Jonathan Rinderknecht have just been made. There are certainly more facts to pull out of the rubble, and there's a lot more that we're going to come to learn in the months and years ahead. But what matters most is finding a way forward. This is a step towards that, a tiny step, but nonetheless something to work with. And so not all hope is lost. There are people out there who note that, like, hey, even even if we had a Republican mayor, and even if Rick Caruso was the mayor, and even if some Republican governor was in charge at the time, 80 to 100-mile-per-hour winds are something we are just not built for in the United States at this time. Maybe if we hadn't spent trillions of dollars over military conflicts that we had no real business getting ourselves involved in, and maybe if we didn't invest so much in the Department of War or legislate such things as the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, maybe if we actually spent our time building homes for people that could also withstand gusts like what we saw over the past year and over the past 8 years since 2017 in the state of California, maybe we'd be in a different ballgame. But people aren't used to thinking this way in the United States, generally speaking. People don't really know the definition of the term sociology, for example, and how Emmanuel Durkheim spelled out for folks the way that so many factors become involved in the general dynamics, most of all, the general dynamics that those with the least among us, that those who are most vulnerable politically and socially among us actually have to face on a day-to-day basis. And so, yeah, this is what we're looking at in Los Angeles and in the state of California over the next couple of months. We'll certainly learn more, but for now, yeah, this is the development for at least a handful of Pacific Palisades victims. And I'd really be curious to hear more from these folks specifically as to what the future for them and what the future for Los Angeles and what the future for California should look like if and when we're thinking comprehensively about the matter. So once again, shout out to Mike Davis and the Ecology of Fear specifically for really breaking this issue down well ahead of time. And if you end up checking it out at your local public library or finding it somewhere off your local bookstore, wherever that might be, by all means, shout it out, and I'll be happy to retweet or repost that wherever I may be. Though, to be frank, I'm also taking a social media break, so I might just highlight it here on YouTube if and where possible. With that said, now that you know, go ahead and let the city know, because it's J.T.